Picture this. A man is just sitting on a bus stop bench, casually offering a piece of chocolate to a total stranger walking by. He introduces himself simply, Forrest Gump. And his incredible story? Well, it all kicks off with a little piece of philosophy passed down from his mama.
That simple idea right there basically becomes the foundation of Forrest's entire life. You see, as a young boy, Forrest has to wear these heavy metal braces on his legs because, as they put it, his back is as crooked as a politician. But his mother, Mama, she always had this amazing way of explaining things so he could easily understand them, making absolutely sure he never felt inferior. Then one day, when some local bullies on bikes decide to target him, a neighborhood girl yells for him to run. And to his own complete surprise, the metal braces literally shatter, and he discovers he can run like the wind blows.
Now, the world is pretty quick to write young Forrest off. The school principal actually points out that his IQ is a 75, which is 5 points below the state requirement for public school. But Mama? No way. She insists he's completely normal and manages to secure him the exact same opportunities as everyone else. It's actually on his very first bus ride to that school where he meets Jenny. She's the only kid kind enough to offer him a seat, and instantly they become like peas and carrots. Despite her own incredibly tragic circumstances, escaping a terribly abusive father to go live with her grandmother, Jenny becomes Forrest's most special friend.
So that amazing running ability, it doesn't just help him escape bullies. It catches the eye of a legendary football coach, literally carrying Forrest straight onto the field at the University of Alabama. His college years just fly by in a blur of historic moments. I mean, he inadvertently witnesses the desegregation of the university as federal troops confront Governor George Wallace, and he runs so fast on the field that he makes the All-American team. This even leads to him meeting President Kennedy, where he drinks 15 Dr. Peppers and simply tells the president he has to pee. And just like that, he actually earns a college degree. With his degree in hand, Forrest's next chapter begins when he gets drafted. Sitting on the bus heading to basic training, he meets Benjamin Buford Blue, a young guy everyone just calls Bubba. Now, Bubba's family has this deep history in Bayou La Batre, Alabama, and they know absolutely everything there is to know about the shrimping business.
Surprisingly enough, Forrest fits right into the Army's highly structured environment. He actually sets a company record for assembling his weapon. He and Bubba bond instantly, and Bubba asks Forrest to go into the shrimping business with him after the war, splitting the profits 50-50. Forrest agrees. Soon after, they arrive in Vietnam and meet their platoon leader, Lieutenant Dan Taylor, who comes from a long, proud military tradition. Lieutenant Dan gives them 2 basic rules to survive. Take good care of your feet by constantly changing your socks, and try not to do anything stupid, like getting killed. From there, they march into the countryside enduring 4 straight months of non-stop rain.
Then, suddenly, the rain stops, and instantly they're ambushed. Remembering Jenny's advice to just run if he's ever in trouble, Forrest sprints to safety. But realizing he's totally alone, he runs right back into the jungle, over and over again, carrying wounded soldiers out one by one, including Lieutenant Dan. Finally, he finds Bubba, who's been shot. Forrest carries him to the riverbank, but it's just too late. Bubba's final words are heartbreakingly simple. "I want to go home." He dies right there by the river. Now, during that rescue, Forrest is actually shot directly in the buttocks. They call it a $1 million wound, though Forrest notes he never saw a nickel of it. He's sent to a military hospital to recover, basically eating as much ice cream as he wants. And it's here that he's introduced to a ping pong table. After being told the secret is to just never take his eye off the ball, Forrest discovers a profound natural talent. I mean, he plays so much he's even playing in his sleep. But right in the bed next to him is Lieutenant Dan, whose legs have been amputated. And this raises a really heavy question in Dan's mind. Did Forrest cheat him out of his destiny? Lieutenant Dan is furious. He truly believes he was supposed to die in the field with honor, just like his ancestors did. And he bitterly resents Forrest for pulling him out of the jungle just to live as, in his words, a legless freak. Eventually, Forrest leaves Vietnam and is actually awarded the Medal of Honor by President Johnson. While taking a walk around Washington, D.C., he accidentally gets swept up in this massive anti-war rally. Before he knows it, he's pushed onto a stage in front of thousands of people, a microphone is shoved into his hands, and just as he starts to speak, an officer unplugs the sound system. No one hears his words about the war except his final sentence. But at that exact moment, he hears a voice yell his name. It's Jenny. They reunite briefly at the rally, and she takes him to a Black Panther gathering. There, Forrest defends Jenny from her abusive boyfriend, Wesley, sparking a quick scuffle before she realizes they just have very different lives. She leaves for California, and Forrest heads back to the Army.
And instead of going back to Vietnam, Forrest is placed in special services to cheer up wounded veterans with his amazing ping pong skills. He becomes so incredibly good that he joins the All-American ping pong team, even traveling to China in a historic display of ping pong diplomacy. He returns a full-blown national celebrity and even ends up on television, sitting right next to John Lennon.
Over the holidays, Forrest tracks down Lieutenant Dan, who's living in a New York City hotel, still bitter and reliant on the government. They spend New Year's Eve together, and the night ends with Lieutenant Dan fiercely defending Forrest, literally throwing out 2 women for calling him stupid. Shortly after that, Forrest visits the White House again with the ping pong team. Placed in a brand new hotel complex, he casually calls security because some flashlights in the opposite office building are keeping him awake. Yep, he inadvertently exposes the Watergate break-in. Following President Nixon's resignation, Forrest is discharged from the Army and finally returns home to Greenbow.
Back home, Forrest discovers he's earned $25,000 from a ping pong paddle endorsement. So what does he do? He takes exactly $24,562.47 of that money to fulfill his solemn promise to Bubba. He travels down to Bayou La Batre, buys a brand new shrimping boat, and names it Jenny. And, to his absolute surprise, Lieutenant Dan rolls right onto the dock, honoring a sarcastic promise he made back in New York to be Forrest's first mate if he ever actually became a shrimp boat captain.
Now, at first, they catch absolutely nothing but junk. But then, Hurricane Carmen hits. While all the other boats are destroyed in the harbor, Lieutenant Dan insists on riding out the storm at sea, literally screaming at God from the ship's rigging. Miraculously, their boat is the sole survivor of the entire hurricane. With a sudden monopoly on the local shrimp supply, catching shrimp becomes incredibly easy, and the Bubba Gump shrimp empire is officially born. They become millionaires, and Forrest observes that Lieutenant Dan finally, truly makes his peace with God.
But the booming business takes a back seat when Forrest learns his mother is sick. He immediately heads back to Greenbow to care for her. Mama calmly explains that it's just her time, saying that death is a part of life we are all destined to do. After she passes away on a Tuesday, Forrest leaves the shrimp company in Lieutenant Dan's capable hands, who, by the way, wisely invest their money in what Forrest calls a fruit company. Forrest then gives away a massive share of his fortune to a church, a hospital, and Bubba's mother, ensuring she never has to work in a kitchen again. As for Forrest, he just settles into cutting the town's grass for free. Then, one evening, Ginny returns to Greenbow. She looks exhausted, like she has nowhere else to go. They live happily like a family for a while, just taking walks and talking. For Forrest, it's hands down the happiest time of his life. He eventually builds up the courage to ask Jenny to marry him. She tells him he'd make a good husband, but she declines. And then, shortly after, she quietly slips away early one morning. This deeply affects Forrest. So, for no particular reason, he decides to go for a little run. Well, that little run turns into a journey to the end of town, then across the entire state of Alabama, and eventually clear across to the ocean. He turns around and just keeps running. For 3 years, 2 months, 14 days, and 16 hours, he runs all across America. People even start following him, seeing him as this profound inspiration and seeking answers to life's big questions. But one day, right in the middle of a desert highway, he abruptly stops, says he's pretty tired, and simply decides to go home. Back in Alabama, Forrest gets a letter from Jenny completely out of the blue. She had seen him running on television. And this actually brings our story right up to the present moment as Forrest finishes recounting his life at that bus stop. The woman he's been talking to tells him he doesn't even need to take the bus to the address on the envelope. It's literally just a few blocks away. So Forrest runs to Jenny's apartment in Savannah, Georgia, and they finally reunite. Inside, Jenny introduces Forrest to a young boy. And then she tells him the boy's name is Forrest, named after his father. Overwhelmed with emotion, he asks the one question that has shadowed his entire life. Is the boy smart? Jenny assures him he's one of the smartest in his class, and you can just see this profound wave of relief wash over him. But Jenny also shares some tragic news. She's suffering from an unknown virus that the doctors just cannot cure. Forrest immediately insists she and little Forrest come home to Greenbow so he can take care of her. So, right there in the yard of his family home, Forrest and Jenny are finally married. Lieutenant Dan even shows up for the wedding, standing tall on his new custom-made titanium alloy legs. Jenny and Forrest share their lives together peacefully until she passes away on a Saturday. Forrest has Jenny buried under their favorite tree.
Visiting her grave, he reflects on the contrasting philosophies of the two most important figures in his life. He weighs Mama's firm belief in absolute destiny against Lieutenant Dan's belief in random, accidental chance. And in a really beautiful moment of clarity, Forrest concludes that maybe it's both. Maybe both are happening at the exact same time.
Back at the edge of his driveway, Forrest stands with his son, waiting for the school bus. He hands little Forrest his favorite book, the exact same one Mama used to read to him, to use for show and tell. The bus doors open, and it's the driver, Dorothy Harris, the very same driver who picked up Forrest decades earlier. Forrest tells his son he loves him, and the boy boards the bus, heading off to make his own way in the world. As Forrest watches that bus drive away, it leaves us with something pretty incredible to think about. Do we each have a pre-written destiny, or are we all just floating around accident-like on a breeze? What do you think?